Mental wellness and mental illness. What's the difference? How can you keep your brain strong? Do you need to exercise it? What can you do to exercise it? How do you create an upward spiral of continuing mental wellness? Enjoy this podcast interview with Alan Hull as we talk about mental wellness and Alan Hull wellness.
Welcome to Share.Care, an all-inclusive community sharing experience, strength, and hope to create strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships. Share.Care communities work toward every individual feeling safe, valued, and heard, free from the threat of danger, pain, or harm. Each episode, founder Damian Andrews explores the principles underpinning Share.Care and invites expert special guests to share their knowledge so you can easily reap the benefits so many others experience. You hold the choice to create your future. Let it be with strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships.
Hello and welcome to the Share.Care podcast. Our belief is that global peace starts at home. Feeling safe, valued, and heard gives you a foundation to confidently step out and make the world a happier and safer place for everyone. Because in today's world, it's in your own interest to help others. And today it is my great pleasure and honor to welcome Alan Hull. Now, Alan is a successful author, stock market fund manager, famously moving his clients' holdings to cash in the latter half of 2007, and for those old enough will remember that, and is now a mental wellness instructor. However, Alan's life was not all roses. Alan came from a childhood of violence and trauma. He drank from the age of 15 and at age 27 hit rock bottom, contemplating suicide either directly or slowly using the bottle. He chose sobriety, found great mentors, and went on to accomplish amazing things. All the amazing things I mentioned earlier. Plus, he became a devoted husband and father. Welcome, Alan.
Thank you very much, Damien. It's a pleasure to be here with you and your community, and thank you for that huge introduction. So I don't know what I can add, so there we go.
Well, you've done amazing things, and as we mentioned in the pre-show and we talked about before, my father was a massive follower of yours and always sending me bits and pieces of your wisdoms that you shared at various investor events and things like that. But for the audience too, I just want to step back a little bit before we go on. Suicide is discussed in this episode, and really for any person listening that might be thinking of taking your own life, please reach out to somebody. There are many people in the world that will help. So please say someone to someone. You'll be surprised at the support you get. So Alan, okay, we're going to step back in the Wayback Machine, and you might remember this. This is a silver DeLorean that Doc Brown invented. When you hit 88 miles an hour, you can travel through time. So do you want to jump in that? Let's hit 88 miles an hour. Let's go back in history and talk about to a place where you had some troubles, difficulties that you overcome, and talk about what they were and how you overcome them, and then we'll move forward to how that led to you doing what you're doing now.
Yep. Okay. Thank you, Damien. So we do have to go back to understand for sure. So to give things context, my childhood, it was what we politely call today a dysfunctional family background. It was, in clear terms, it was a violent family upbringing. What there was the threat of violence. So growing up in a family with 4 children, the constant threat of violence. So it's not so much the violence that occurs in a violent family background, it's the threat. So as a result of that, you suffer childhood trauma. And what trauma is simply you're always on high alert. You're always that fear reaction's just ready to trigger. It's on a hairline trigger, and you have that fight, flight, freeze response. And so you're always in that sort of, elevated state of alertness, and you're always living with fear. that causes, for instance, that being in that particular state, that constant trauma. I was not a sickly child, but I certainly had my issues. I'd go to school and I'd go to sleep. I'd be tired. I'd go to sleep. So my education suffered in that regard, because at school I wasn't under any sort of threat. So you'd relax. The other thing was that it shuts down your that trauma, that feeling of high alertness all the time. Your body shuts down what it deems to be non-essential systems. A couple of those are your digestive system, and the other one is your immunity system. So children in this situation often get quite ill, and I certainly suffered my issues with illness. What happened just to into the teenage years is I was introduced to alcohol and drugs. When you're you're living with trauma, and you've got this heightened state of alertness. When you take a mind-altering substance, the effect is profound, and far more so. So that's why there's such a high correlation between people who take mind-altering substances and trauma or PTSD. Yeah. Because it has such a profound effect, far more than the average person. So I discovered mind-altering substances, if you like, at the age of 15. The situation, obviously, becoming a young adult, I progressed through life, but I was a practicing alcoholic. I was caught up in this substance abuse in my 20s. My siblings also caught up in this substance abuse. The turning point for me, and this is where we get to the sort of suicide, was I was 26. My sister Shani was 28. She was an alcoholic drug addict, and she committed suicide. She hit what we call a rock bottom, a sort of a point where it's the crossroads, and you have that choice to make a decision in your life whether you are going to get well. You're going to continue on your mad ways and probably end up in jail, or possibly commit suicide or something like that. She chose suicide, and that was the turning point for me. I mean, it was a highly tragic event, of course. When you're close to suicide, what's driven home is your own mortality. So suddenly you realize, hey, if I keep playing this game, I'm going to end up, dead beside us, sort of thing. And I didn't want that. And but I drank more and more, because I also reached a point where I didn't care. There was an apathy that set in my life, and I drank more and more until eventually I hit a rock bottom, and I chose to get well, thank God. And I was 27 years old, and I chose to get well, turn my life around. And I joined an anonymous organisation, and I had a series of plain talking mentors who said, you can either get well or you will eventually die if you keep on the path you're on. And part of recovery is living well. So you have to not drink, but you have to get into a state of mind where you don't want to drink. Okay, so I don't, as a sober alcoholic, I don't exercise self-will. I don't want to drink. The thought of drinking never crosses my mind. I've got a fantastic life today. And that comes about through good living. And, so, and what they use is, all sorts of, when you become educated in the field of psychiatry and psychology, you start to realize that a lot of what's going on in these self-help organizations is just good psychology. A lot of them are simple brain hacks. A lot of it's about externalization. For instance, a lot of people, why do we talk so openly about this? I've got a great forgettery, and I'd love to forget, about my drinking and all the stuff that happened. It was all terrible. If I forget about that, what's going to happen is I'm going to want to go back to a drink, because I do love to drink. I just haven't done it for a very long time. But I'll go back to that if I forget. So I've got to constantly keep reminding myself who and what I am. And so that's part of the whole thing. But it's mental wellness. So it's all about understanding how your brain works. It's about, I received years and years of tips and advice and help. Easy does it, but do it. Surrender to win. There's so many cliches that I've been fed all my life. If you watch my videos, you'll see them. It's peppered with cliches. I complained I had no shoes until I met a man with no feet. That's one of my favorite. Attitude of gratitude. And all that stuff is all about mental wellness. And that's what started me on this journey. And I've had an amazing life. I've been sober for more than half my life, and it's just been an incredible life. And part of that, and this is a really key point, that the quintessential issue facing or the disease concept is around selfishness. I pour the drink down my throat. People who take drugs, no one forces those drugs on them. No one forced me to have a drink. I poured the drink down my own throat. And that was through essentially because I was suffering disease of self.
Yeah.
And one of the things I've got to be, I'm enabled today. I'm healthy. I'm happy. I've got plenty of resources. I can pretty much do what I want to do. So what do I choose to do? Because I could very easily choose to be selfish in my life. And that would be extremely bad for me because I've got an addictive personality, and if I was to act very selfishly, I'd get back into trouble again. So what a big part of recovery is not being selfish, is to be selfless. And that means doing things for other people. And I've worked in a volunteer capacity for many years in drug and alcohol rehabilitation. And I've, for instance, been on a help phone line. Been doing that for over 20 years on a voluntary basis. So done a lot of work in wellness for many years just to keep me well. So I've got to give it away to keep it. And that's what I do. I give it away to keep it. And, and it's good for me. But so keeping that selfish behavior at bay by being selfless. And that means for me, sharing all about wellness. And what I've learned, what I know, and it just so happens I think I'm a pretty reasonable teacher, and I'm a communicator, and a lot of the stuff that we're dealing with, as you would be well aware of, can be somewhat complex and convoluted, and I think the trick is to make it simple and communicate that effectively. And that's a large part of what I do as a mental wellness instructor is simplify it and communicate these really key things in a very simple form that everyone can understand and digest.
Yeah, I love that. From that perspective, to put that timeline in there as well, because on top of now being a wellness instructor, I mean, you managed, as we talked about in the intro, finances. You're very good at providing advice in the stock market area. And from your bio on your stock market site, your first stock that you purchased or were given was at age 8. Now, I relate to that. I remember getting some CSR stocks given to me by my dad when I was I can't remember exactly how. I don't think I was 8. I think I was a little bit older. But from that perspective, when we put this in that timeline, because you talk about up to age 27, you had an issue with alcohol, and you mentioned drugs there as well. Where did the stock market things fit into that? Because I'm trying to understand how you mentioned about an addictive personality, which I take that as obsessive compulsive. I relate to that because you sound like you are very driven to get things done. When you get your mind stuck on something, you're going to push really hard to get it done. How did those two connect? Was the stock market? I mean, you had some stocks when you were 8, and then you fluffed around with it for a little bit, or did that drive correlate or coexist with the issue with alcohol, and then at some point it resolved? Where did that fit in?
Yeah, it was really, I mean, that was a career thing. As a person, I mean, my first passion was electronics as a kid, and in the 70s and 80s, it was just a fantastic time to be on the leading edge of technology. I mean, the personal computer had just been invented. And I was one of the first Apple computer technicians in Melbourne.
Oh wow!
So I could talk, and now I restore old radios. So I do that. But
I love that.
What actually happened was I was self-employed from a very young age, from about the age of 23, and not because I'm some kind of genius, but because I was effectively unemployable because of the drinking problem. No one would be silly enough to give me a job. So I worked for myself, basically in the computer industry. But the other passion I always had was mathematics.
Yeah.
Really loved mathematics. And what happened was, as you're probably aware, the evolution of the computer industry was such that we can now buy computers. They're a disposable item. There's no
Mm.
need to repair them. So it was during the 1990s. I was in the computer industry, and that was just dying.
Yeah.
Basically, it wasn't commercially viable, and I also had this parallel interest. My father introduced me to stocks as a boy, and
Mm.
he was a share trader, and so we basically I was introduced to stocks and the stock market. I love mathematics, and I had that interest going in the background. And what happened was the sort of computer business died,
Yeah.
slowly sort of died a natural death as they became a disposable item. And I moved across, particularly in the NASDAQ boom in the late 1990s, into the stock market. I started teaching in my garage. I was just running loud. I was an active share trader, and I
Mm.
was teaching in the garage. And what can I tell you? It just took off.
Yeah.
A publishing house got a hold of a set of my course notes,
Mm.
and I was contacted by this publishing house in 2000,
Mm.
and they gave me a book deal. So, and it sort of took off from there. But I think that there with the stock market, I mean, I didn't set out to be an advisor per
Mm.
se. I set out to be an educator.
Yeah.
So I'm the one thing that's a common theme throughout is I'm an educator and a communicator. And it was absolutely the same with the stock market. I've written books, I've run classes, I produce newsletters, but it's about empowering people to
Mm.
understand how the stock market works and really how to manage their own investments rather than have someone else do it for them.
Yeah.
In the same way, what we're trying to do with the mental wellness is say to people, understand how your brain works. Don't have
Mm.
someone sort of study you and diagnose you and say, well, you do A, B, C, but really understand what's going on in your head. Have a picture of your brain and how it works. So I'm very much into teaching people what's happening in their head,
Mm.
and then providing a solution and saying, well, given this. That's the sort of key thing, and that's certainly a common theme across my stock market stuff. What's happening is, well, I'm still doing the stock market. I'm a licensed financial advisor,
Yeah.
and that's my day job. I started the wellness business with my wife.
Yeah.
She's really runs the back end administration. I'm the front man, if you like, and that's so I'm really running the two businesses in parallel. And
Mm.
people say, why are you doing two things at once? And because I love it. I just love it. I love the wellness stuff. I love talking to guys like you
Mm.
and your communities. I love helping people, but I love the stock market too. And I mean, even if I wasn't running a business and I didn't have the business, I'd still be an active share trader.
Yeah.
So the beauty today is I get to choose what I want to do, and I'm doing what I love.
Yeah.
So I don't work. So Warren Buffett said, if you love what you do, you won't work another day in your life. And
Exactly.
I feel very much like that.
Yeah, I love that. What I wanted to, and the reason for asking that question is because you talk about being a wellness coach, which is you helping people with their minds to be well. And you mentioned earlier, you talked about, if I look at my notes here, you talked about that you don't want to drink, and because your life is full without it. I mean, and I relate to that from my experience as well. I actually stopped drinking because a partner that I was with, she had I believe she had an issue, and I thought maybe if I stop drinking, she will stop.
Yeah.
Um, and it didn't work, and the relationship didn't work. But from my perspective, I was like, I'm enjoying this too much without the drink. I don't need it, so I
Yeah.
never went back. But with that, then the reason I wanted to link that to the finances as well, because when we're talking about mental wellness, I mean, we've got mental wellness associated with our health, but also too, from that perspective, it seems to be, and you mentioned Warren Buffett, it seems to be there's a mindset there to do with creating wealth that has to do with mental well-being as well. There's some people, and I know from my younger life, when I wanted money to fulfill something that was missing within me. So I'd be chasing after it, and it was really, really difficult. And then when I
Yeah.
made that step and actually fixed myself, then when I became a whole person, all of a sudden the money became easy. But it wasn't just money, everything else became
Became
easy.
easy.
How much of that, from that, and that's why I wanted to cross those over, because you have both. You have that financial experience and the mental wellness experience. How much of that does this mental wellness is about being okay with you, about liking yourself, and being okay with your position, that makes life easier, as opposed to chasing something that you're missing and trying to say, as they say, the love of money, not money itself, but the love of money is the root of all evil. If you're trying to fill that gap, how does someone find their way around that?
Yeah, that's a huge area, Damien. We're going to be here for another hour. There's a couple of things you've touched on here. One of them is priority. Your priority's got to be just mental wellness. If your priority is making money, then you're probably not going to succeed.
Yeah.
If you're, my priority wasn't, I didn't go into the stock market to make money. I went into the stock market because I absolutely loved the stock market. I loved the maths. I loved the whole game of, picking companies and trading systems and all that sort of stuff. It wasn't about money. The people have a hole in their soul and they try to fill it with stuff. And, we have very simple ways and obvious ways that people fill the hole in their soul. For men, it's quite often their career, their job. And that's, of course, the barometer of your job is money. So if you earn more money, therefore, I must be better at my job. For women, that hole in their soul is often filled by having children. And that's fine. That's that fills that hole in the soul for a time. But the getting of money, if you like, money itself is an enabler. So it doesn't. What is money? You can't eat it. You can't build a house out of money. What is money? It's you have to understand what is money, and this is where that whole education about money comes in. People say to me, "What's wealth? How do I know when I'm wealthy?" I say to them, "You're wealthy when you don't care about money.
Exactly.
You don't care about money. You're wealthy. That you're wealthy enough." But that money becomes, it's not the end game. What money is, it's an enabler. And if, for instance, I told you earlier that I suffer that disease of self, and it's always there lurking in the background, and I have to run constant vigilance, right? So I'm in constant training. I've got a chronic condition that I have to keep maintained, and a big part of that is not letting that getting selfish. Okay. If you've got a person who's unwell and they're sick, they're mentally sick, and they've got money, then money enables them to be unwell. It enables you to be sick. Money enables you to do some really bad things, some terrible things. This is where we see this, particularly when people become financially enabled very suddenly and they can't manage it. Okay. So we see this with rock stars. We see it with actors. We see it with these people who suddenly have fame and fortune and they can't, they can't manage it. What's happening to them is that they've gone from this state of like everyone else, I guess, where they're driven by need. They've got to get up in the morning. They've got to go to work. They've got to pay the mortgage. They've got to make the car payment. They've got to pay the electricity and the gas. They've got to pay for the school fees, pay for food, etc., etc. Once you become really financially enabled and you've got lots of money, like you have a windfall of Tats Lotto of $5 million is a good example. Suddenly you don't have to worry about the mortgage. Suddenly you don't have to worry about, paying the bills. What do? Well, in most cases, people become selfish. Now, selfish is not you have to understand, again, we get back to just understanding the basic makeup of human beings. Selfishness is part of your survival instinct, like a squirrel that squirrels away acorns. So the more resources I can gain, I can gather and I can hold and hoard, the safer I am. So if I was to put $1 million into your bank account tomorrow, I'm sure you'd get a lot of warm fuzzies from that and you'd feel pretty good. That's because you're feeding that security instinct that you have. So being selfish is a normal thing, but it gets out of control. And money, suddenly enabling people with money, bang, they become extremely selfish and they blow themselves up. That's very common amongst people who win Tats Lotto. So I was very lucky that I went through the process of my recovery. I became mentally well, and then I became financially enabled. Again, what I was doing was pursuing my interests, what I was passionate about, and everything else.
Yeah.
And money comes. I think money is a byproduct in many regards. If you're pursuing your passion, and you go to
Yeah.
work, and you obviously, people who are passionate, that love their work, are going to work so much harder and so much more dedicated than people who aren't.
Yeah.
So go to work, be passionate, and the money follows. So as I say, I was a bit lucky that the mental wellness came before the money.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because it applies in all areas of life, from my understanding. I have some wonderful friends in Canada, and they wrote a book called The Unbreakable Marriage. They're a couple that have been together for, I don't know, they're a lot older than me, and I'm older than I look. So, and in their book opens with, you don't have marriage problems, you're two people with problems that you're bringing to a marriage. And I'm relating that to that comment that you just made about, you became well and then the money came. And I'm sure, if we expand that to the rest of your life, no doubt that your relationships became better as well as a result of you becoming well. From that side of things, how does someone recognize, that there is a hole there? How can they do that? I mean, that's one of the things that there's been, the question I've been trying to answer is, that old thing of leading a horse to water, you can't make a drink. And how do we do that?
Yeah. Look, I've got a decision making thing in my brain. You've got a decision making thing called the
Mm,
prefrontal cortex.
mm,
And it gathers all the information from our brains and external stimuli and everywhere in our bodies, and it makes command decisions which we act on.
mm,
If you do not acknowledge personally that you have a problem, then
mm.
you will not fix a problem that you do not perceive that you have.
Yeah.
So one of the frustrations that we feel in life, of course, is we can generally readily identify a problem in another human being before we recognize the problem in ourselves.
Yes.
Unfortunately, so I
Yeah.
see the people around me, and I recognize the problems in them, but I
Mm,
can't do anything about that.
mm.
You might have heard of a saying. It says, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Now,
Correct.
again, you've
Yeah.
got a fair idea where that comes from.
Yeah.
It's psychological. It's all psychology, and it's basically saying that's that person's brain. If they don't accept they've got a problem, they won't fix it.
Yeah.
So whilst I can educate people,
Mm,
they have to come to that themselves, is to say, hey, look, I've got a problem. Can you help me?
yeah.
That's 50% of the problem, probably more than 50% of the problem. I think
Mm,
solving problems it's the willingness to change.
yeah.
And this is also emphasized to me. You need to be willing, Alan. You've got to be open and willing. And if you're not open and willing, you won't
Mm,
change.
yeah.
Particularly the smarter the people, the more
Mm,
intelligent, the smarter the people. Denial is a very powerful thing. And
yeah.
I can tell you, as someone that's worked in recovery for a very long time, there's no point in fighting it. I don't try and fight it. Some people just aren't ready to get recovery. And I don't go around pointing out to people what their problems are, because it's a pretty pointless exercise, and it's not my place anyway to judge others.
Mm,
God grant me the strength to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can.
mm,
That's and the wisdom to know the difference. Well,
yeah.
I can change me. So it's really my responsibility on this planet to recognize my problems and my shortcomings and to do something about it.
Yeah, I think what you've
So
said there is, I mean, because the organisation you're mentioning, for people that aren't aware, is Alcoholics Anonymous, and I've had a number of friends who went to meetings and invited me to come to meetings, and I did go to meetings to understand how that process worked. And that's what I wanted to make that step as well, to ask that question from your perspective, because I mean, there was periods in my life where I drank quite heavily. There was a period when I was quite younger, in my early 20s, I drank 2 bottles of vodka a day.
yeah,
So
okay.
well, quite extensively. But the thing was, I could always stop. It
Yeah,
was something for me. It was never, and that's where a few friends, who were going to AA, said, "Oh, you should come along." And it's like I come along and went, "Yeah, I get that, but if I want to, I can stop." And I did. There was many times I remember I was having I was on a trip in Malaysia, and I was talking to at that time I was a vegetarian. I wasn't drinking, I wasn't smoking, and I was talking with some guys there about, we were out and talking with them, and I was explaining that to them, and I said, "Oh, I don't drink." They said, "You don't drink, you don't smoke, you don't eat meat?"
Yeah.
And one of them looked at me very seriously and said, "Do you still have sex?" And I was thinking, "Not with you." But I was just wondering from that perspective of this addictive personality, this for someone wanting to get well, and being in that position where they can't. And I don't like using the word they can't, because I think there's always a possibility. But obviously, I don't have the mindset to understand what it's like to be in someone's shoes who can get easily drawn back into that. What is that like, and how does someone overcome that on their journey to wellness?
Well, you have to, again, it comes back to this education. You've got to understand how your brain is working. So, and I use the example when we talk about addiction, I use the example of a packet of twisties. I love twisties. I can't control my intake of twisties. So once I start eating twisties, I'm in a lot of trouble. And I'm going to eat the whole packet. Twisties. Yeah. And that, the people who work in that, for instance, on the serious side of that, the people who work in the food industry know about this, and they spend literally hundreds of thousands of dollars developing the crunch of the food, let alone the smell and the texture and da-da-da-da. There's a real science to it.
Toothpaste as well, to add that to the, all those toothpaste as well, when they added foam to toothpaste, it made it more, people liked it more. Yeah, exactly.
So I eat a twisty. I eat the first twisty, and then that sort of motivational cycle starts with the endorphin release in the brain. I eat it, I swallow it, I want more, so I get around through that motivational cycle, more. Once you start drinking, it's the same process. You're caught in the same cycle, right? Once you're drinking. Yeah. So what happens is I can't stop myself from eating twisties. So I get to the end of the packet's empty. So that's what forces me to stop eating twisties. I'm out of twisties, right?
And make sure you haven't got any more packets.
This is what happens to someone who's, say, drinking or drugging or whatever. I mean, eating junk food, or anything like that. They run out of that thing and then they're stopped. Now, what's happening is in the motivational cycle, and this is a really key point. Your brain is, think of it in two parts: a thinking brain and a feeling brain. It's the feeling brain that is caught in that motivational cycle. Now, I've got a thinking brain, a rational thinking brain said, Alan, if you keep eating twisties, you're going to get fat and it's going to affect your complexion and it's not good for you. Don't do it. So, but it doesn't have time. It's a slow moving part of my brain. It's efficient, and it thinks good things, but it works slowly, whereas the feeling part of our brain works really fast. Yeah. So what happens is, once I get into that motivational cycle, my thinking brain can't get me out of it. Once I run out of twisties, then my thinking brain says, now we're going to make some command decisions about how you consume twisties. And of course, I've slowed down. I've got no twisties. And my thinking brain says, don't buy any more twisties. Don't have twisties in the house. Yeah. So I don't have twisties in my house. My wife saw that video, I got to say, just as a joke. She saw that video a few weeks ago, and she went out and bought 2 huge packets of twisties, stuck them in the house she said, guess what I've got?
Yeah, so, tempting you. So it reminds me of a story about an apple.
Does it? Yeah. Yeah, except this one, it wasn't the snake. Yeah. But anyway, so that the same thing happens with any other form of addiction. So if you've got alcohol, and what happens is people finish, they're hungover, they feel terrible, they're out of booze, and their thinking brain kicks in, and they say, I'm never going to drink again. This is horrible. I've done horrible stuff. I've been on the phone, we're in a blackout. I've said terrible things to some of my best friends, blah, blah, blah. I feel absolutely shocking, right? I'm never going to do this again. And they absolutely mean it. This is totally sincere. But what happens is their feeling brain, which wants to drink because it loves to drink, it hijacks the thinking brain and it says, think of an excuse why we can go back to the next drink. And so the cycle repeats. So you have a physical allergy coupled with a mental obsession. And the same thing happens with smoking. How many people, if you tell someone who's 35 is smoking cigarettes, and you confront them and you say, hey, it's not good for you, and they'll say, well, I know that, but I've got a grandmother who's 80 years old and she's still smoking,
Yeah.
and that's their rational thinking is denial cycle is kicked in.
Yeah.
There's nothing you do about it. What happens is you reach a point of pain where the pain gets so great that you go, I'm ready to do something about it. I've got a problem and I need to do something about it.
Yeah.
So, and that's an internal decision. So again, this sort of recognizing issues with other people and not being able to, there's no point in like what do they call them, interventions and that type of thing. They don't work, because as soon as you put someone in an intervention situation, they're going to get their back up. That activates their fight response. Again, it's part of their instinctive drive. Once that happens, you're not going to get near them. They have to come to it themselves. And that's a very painful process, and it's a difficult process in every case. And unfortunately, there's no shortcut and there's no easy way around it. And so it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter whether it's a video game addiction. It doesn't matter whether you're hooked on fast food, smoking cigarettes, eating twisties, drinking booze, smoking dope. It doesn't matter. It's all the same stuff at the end of the day, largely.
So from that side of things, do we need to, this rock bottom, that's relative for a lot of different people. Is that, rock bottom can be a number of different things. Is that the case? Is it, it might be someone being close to suicide for someone, and then someone else, it might be just, I can't, I've lost my job. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's right. Human beings are like that too. It takes a crisis to make us change our ways. Most adults over the age of 30 won't change their behaviour and their habits unless some sort of crisis occurs. And unfortunately, for some of us, you have to go a long way. So we call it how far do you choose to go down the track. So it depends how much pain you're going to go through before you make a change. And for some people, that's like a near-death experience, like they get close to committing suicide. And other people will just wake up one morning. I've heard stories of people waking up with a really bad hangover and saying, I've had enough, I'm going to stop. For me, smoking, it was when I had children. And I was a smoker, and I stopped smoking when I had children. And that seemed to be the tipping point in my brain that said, what's more important to me, smoking cigarettes and that instant gratification from smoking, or my children and the example I'm setting my children? And for me, that was the trigger. That was the tipping point. And that's an internal thing, and it's very unique to each individual. You want to get, and wellness to me, so it's not homogenous. It's not like I'm not sick.
Yes.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm not sick, right? That's not what well is. Well is a scale above being not sick. And the further up the scale you get, the safer you are.
Yeah.
So you want to get well as you can possibly get. And it's like you get onto this positive going spiral.
Yeah.
And that's where, I got well, so I stopped smoking. I was better at my job. I started exercising. I started eating better. So, as much wellness as I can get on board, and I'm addicted to that. So, I'm addicted to that. And, the other day it was in where I am in Melbourne, it was pouring rain on Sunday, and I don't know what possessed me. I thought, I don't care. I'm just going to put on my runners and go for a run. And I just ran, I ran and ran and ran and ran. And that's a good habit. And that's sort of what I do now. But I think I say that you want a negative going spiral, or you want a positive going spiral. And you can tell people this stuff, and hopefully somewhere, sometime, somehow, what I say may resonate with someone.
Yeah.
And I have had people come to me and say, I heard you say this 6 years ago and I stopped smoking. Or I heard you say this 7 years ago and I stopped drinking.
Yeah.
And that's fantastic. That's to me, that's just huge. That makes me so happy to know that I've had that sort of positive impact on someone's life. And you're not aware of it. The other thing is, if I can just keep going for a sec,
you can.
I like to talk.
It's your show.
Okay. So basically, we've got that situation where basically you can hear the same thing over and over and over again.
Yeah.
One day, the right person will say it in the right way. When you're in the right state of mind,
yes,
bang, click. You've got, I get it. The penny drops. And that's what happens. So, that's where if you hang around in the right environments with the right sort of people, and you're picking up the right sort of wisdom, environment's very important. And you might have to hear it 50 or 60 times before the penny drops.
Yeah.
And that's the same. And that's the same with me. I mean, I've got, bad habits and things still, of course. And, people are telling me all the time and I'm not getting the message. And then one day I'll get the message and I might stop, I might start getting out of bed earlier in the morning because one of my foibles is I love to get out of bed late and slow. So, slow get her out of bed. I've got to get out of bed quicker. But you know what I mean? It's one day something might happen that'll make me change my behaviours there. I don't know.
I love that what you talked about there is because we're talking about, this rock bottom, but really you can reframe that to being the penny drops. And sometimes it can be really painful because a friend of mine, she once said to me, she said, you learn through pain until you learn to learn through joy.
Yes.
And that was, for me, profound, even though I kind of knew it, but it was the way she put it, that penny dropped and went, oh, yeah, that's what I've been doing for a long time. But you mentioned their habits a few times, and what I want to explore that is a little bit, because for me, I looked at procrastination, for example, and there was times, and I think we've all done this, where especially now with streaming services, we've binge watched a series, and we're going, and I was processing that, and I was wondering, when I'm doing that, am I focusing on what I want to do broader, or am I procrastinating, or am I really focusing on what I want to be doing in this moment? And when I thought about it, when I analyzed my thoughts, I was going, oh, actually what I want to be doing now is I want to be watching this. And then when I stopped and went, hang on a minute, what's really important to me? And you mentioned this before about what's important to you. And I said, well, what's important to me is this other objective where I need to get this report done. And all of a sudden it almost became painful to continue watching. As soon as I made that mental shift, it was quite profound.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering about that, because when I thought about it, I mean, I used to smoke as well, but I could always quit whenever I wanted to. I'd smoke and then I'd quit, and then I'd take it up again and then I'd quit. But every time when I wanted to quit, it was never a struggle, because I always thought about it from the perspective, I want to breathe clean air, not I want to quit smoking. How much of this habit that we create is about, because if I say to you, don't think of a pink elephant, or, don't think of a red car, because that's the way your reticular activating system works.
Yeah.
How much of you breaking these habits and going on this journey to wellness of that upward spiral is having a clear objective and making that the prominent focus in your life?
Well, I mean, there's, again, the thinking brain. Our thinking brains work extremely well. So, and we generally, I say to people, do you know what good food is? Do you know what good food is? And you can grab the nearest 12-year-old and ask them, you know what good food is? And I'll say, a high fiber cereal, fruit, vegetable, don't eat too much meat, don't have too many condiments, don't eat salt, don't eat sugar. Everybody knows what good food is. But do we eat good food all the time? No, we don't.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so our thinking brains kind of know what we should be doing, but our feeling brains say, no, let's go and have a pie and a sausage roll.
Yes.
So we're constantly, and we need pleasure. We need pleasure, of course, to make life, to be part of being happy is feeling good. But it's putting the thinking brain in charge.
Yeah.
And there are tactics that we can use to put the thinking brain in charge. One of the ways is take your time to make a decision. I'm responsible for the first twisty I eat. Yeah. I'm not responsible for the fifth one. I'm responsible for the first one. So, at that moment, I'm responsible to not eat that first twisty. And that's a thinking brain thing. Once I start eating the twisties, I've got no control. That becomes a feeling brain thing, and I'm kind of lost. What you've got to do is not get to a point where my brain's even thinking, though, about eating the first twisty.
Yeah.
I don't even want to get to that point.
Yes.
Right? Now, that's what really getting up the wellness scale is all about. I don't even get close to eting a twisty.
Yeah.
Right? I don't have them
even
in
with
my
those
house.
big
Well, I
packets
do
in
now.
front of you.
That's right. Yeah, I've got the packets there now. It's a bit of a problem. But the point is that I don't even want to get close to thinking about eating the first twisty. So you've got to really set yourself up, put the thinking brain in charge, and say, like we have the situation, for instance, where if you're trying to help someone stop drinking or smoking, you say, well, obviously, if you've got any cigarettes in the house, or you've got any alcohol in the house, you should get rid of it. You'd be surprised how many people go, well, actually, no, I don't want to do that. And you go, why not? I mean, obviously, if it's not there, you can't drink it, you can't smoke it, but you want to have it there.
They want it. They want it, yeah.
Sort of, in the back of their mind, they're thinking, I want to leave that door open.
Yeah.
And that's where, you have to, you want to remove the thought or the object or whatever it is, as you say, if you think about the purple elephant, look, if you say don't think about it, you'll think about the purple elephant. It's the same thing. So you want to remove that and not think about it. I mean, I don't think about drinking. It doesn't come up on my radar. I don't think about smoking today. It doesn't come up. I'm too preoccupied with the good stuff, the other stuff that I love doing. So you want to fill the void. You want to be occupied. In your mind. So I haven't got time for that sort of stuff. I don't know where the hours go in the day. I haven't got enough hours in my day. How I ever found time to drink, smoke. I used to smoke 1.5 packets a day. Like I used to smoke 40 cigarettes a day. And you think, how did you ever find the time to do it? But my life's changed so much and I've moved so far away from that particular habit, if you get my drift. So
how much of that is, again, you mentioned habits and the associations you make, and I'll draw this similar when I used to smoke and when I quit smoking, because we smoke, whatever we do, whatever habits we have is for a reason. It serves us in some way, and generally smoking is a good one because even though a lot of times people will smoke because they're stressed, it changes their physical state so that they're not feeling stressed, but they're feeling a different stress. But they're not feeling what they were before, so it's solving that problem. And what I did was I went, okay, I know, because I knew that, I went, all right, when I'm feeling that stress moment that I want to have a cigarette, I'm going to do something. And I literally did 10 star jumps. And it was like when I had this, and it immediately changed my association. So how much of it is, on this journey to wellness, is it being aware of these are the way we react, and then training yourself in a different way. I have a friend in Texas. He's this wonderful organization called the Fatherhood Experience, where he helps dads, get hold of their life and recover and be good dads, essentially. But he used to be a heavy drug user, and he would say, the high he gets now, and we'll touch on giving, we'll come back to giving later, but he said the high he gets now from giving and helping people is much higher than any drug he ever took. Yep. And I was just wondering, from that perspective, on this wellness journey, how does someone make that shift to going, okay, they've recognized it. How do they implement that? What steps can they take to go, all right, I'm going to condition myself to respond to these stresses or whatever it is in a different way?
Yeah, that's for some people. Some people make that come to that point that the penny drops or the rock bottom or whatever you want to call it, and they will simply say, "Well, I'm ready to turn the corner," and they'll turn the corner, and that won't be a problem. Others can't do it that easily, and it becomes really, you have to hand your life and your will over to the care of something other than yourself, because I can't be in the driver's seat. Because I just can't trust myself. I'm not capable of doing it on my own. In other words, you have to reach out for help. That's what that simply means. You need to reach out for help. So you need to reach out for help. Some of us need external assistance. Some of us don't. Some of us just need education. Yeah. The problem is, again, you hit on it before when you were actually framing your question. You said, I feel this. I feel this. I think this. I want to do this. I'm thinking this, but I feel this. And that's where you've got to get this idea that there's two parts to your brain. And what we do, I can teach you stuff, but I teach your thinking brain. That's your logical, rational brain. Yeah. You've got a feeling brain, and the problems, unfortunately, most of our problems, behavioral problems, stem from the feeling brain. And you don't teach the feeling brain. Yeah. You train the feeling brain. Yeah. So you're already saying it. You're going, well, if I get myself into this habit and I do this, a habit, what is a habit? It's a training regime. That's exactly what a habit is. Yes. It's a training regime. And I've got lots of really good habits in my life today. And that's what wellness is all about. I say change your habits, change your life. What are habits so important? Well, what's the big deal? And this is, I think, if you go back to the first principles again, I'm passionate about this. Yeah. If I said to you, look, I've got a sore wrist. I think I'll take an Alka-Seltzer. You'd be going, well, Alka-Seltzer's for your tummy, Alan, not for a sore wrist. And then I'll say, I've got a sore tummy. I think I'll strap my wrist. You go, are you silly? But that's what people don't understand their brain like that. And they can't say, I've got a thinking brain, I've got a feeling brain. This problem lies in the feeling brain. Therefore, I have to train myself out of this behavior.
Yeah.
Right? Not teach myself. It's not enough to learn. You have to train yourself. And that's exactly what you hit on when you framed the question, was that when I wanted to smoke, I'd do star jumps, right? So you're changing the habit, right? You're breaking the habit, and you're training your feeling brain, and that's how we alter our behavior. And that's you've answered your own question. But if people understand that this feeling brain can't be taught, it doesn't actually communicate in like written words and language, and it actually communicates in feelings, right? And that's where it's a completely different part of your brain, and it's the one that's habitual. I mean, it comes back to that animal instinct. If I undertake a certain behavior, and that behavior is I feel good, I like it, and there's no bad consequences, what am I going to do? I'll do it again.
Yes.
I'll do it again. I'll do it again.
Exactly.
I'll do it again. So if you say to me, okay, every time I smoke a cigarette, I'm going to do 50 push-ups.
Yeah.
Right? Now, your thinking brain, by the way, your thinking brain and your feeling brain, there's kind of a barrier. So they're not connected. So you can actually think something and not feel it, and you can feel something and not think it, which is kind of really weird. But if you say, every time I feel like a cigarette, I'm going to do 50 push-ups.
Yeah.
Okay, now write that down and have your wife sign it or something, so it's you're locked in. So what happens is
you're not going to get any in if you don't do it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. There'll be a punishment. But if you smoke a cigarette, so you go outside, you have your cigarette, but then you come in and you have to go through the pain of enduring 50 push-ups, whether you can do them continuously or not, right? Eventually, your feeling brain's going to say, this sucks. I don't want to do 50 push-ups. I'm not going to have a cigarette. It's not worth the pain. Yeah. And so that's the way you retrain that feeling part of your brain, even though you're aware of it. Like your thinking brain's told you, sounds a bit silly, but this kind of thing actually works. Okay.
Yeah, I think, when you're talking about the feeling brain, how does that relate to your unconscious? Because it sounds like there's a connection there. And from what you're talking about as well, I think we've all had that experience where we've thought we've understood something, we've gone and done it and fluffed it up completely. And then other times where we thought we didn't know and then surprised ourselves with how well we did. And there's disconnect between conscious understanding and unconscious action. Is that similar to what you're talking about with the feeling brain?
That it is a bit. I mean, that's part of it. A lot of our behaviour is controlled through our subconscious. Now, the subconscious mind, I talk about this because it's one of those parts in education that people they hear about it and it's all a bit flaky. I say, okay, if you're conscious of something, it means it's at the front of your brain. You're aware of it, immediately aware of it. That's in your conscious thought. So what is subconscious thought? I was driving my daughter when she was on her L plates, and we pulled up in an intersection to do a left-hand turn. And there was a car going we're going to turn left this way. I'm looking at the camera while I do to see if it makes sense. They turn left here. There's a car going that way, but he's doing a right-hand turn. So we thought it's going to do a right-hand turn. I've come up and I said to my daughter as she was just about to go on the road, stop, don't go. And I'm yelling at her. And she's, and she's going, why not? And then the right-hand turner did a U-turn straight in front of us.
Yeah.
And she's gone, how did you know that? And I'm like, I don't know, but I knew it. I just knew it. And then later on, when I sat down quietly and thought about it, and I pulled up that subconscious thinking into my conscious brain, I realized that subconsciously I was watching the wheels of the car and the guy was looking at us. He wasn't looking up the road where someone doing a right-hand turn should have been looking that way. He was looking at us.
Yeah.
Of course, someone who's doing a U-turn would have been looking at us to see if we were going to go. And but all that kind of awareness and all that, people call it muscle memory. People call it my gut instinct. That's all stuff in your subconscious. Yeah. And what it is, that's what had me instinctively say, stop, right? Because I realized my brain, my subconscious brain, we're in real danger, stop immediately. And it slammed on the brakes in my head. I didn't even know why. I wasn't consciously aware. I had to go away and sit down and literally for 10 minutes think about it to try and work out why that. So the subconscious contains a lot of stuff going on in our memories in our subconscious, and we have that memory association that's going on in our feeling limbic system part of our brain.
Yeah.
which affects a huge amount of our behavior. I love the one that is when we smell vanilla.
Yes.
And you immediately smile. Someone smells
Yes.
it, you smile. You know why? Because you remember eating ice cream as a kid, and it's
Yeah.
always a great memory. And
Yeah.
that's that memory association. That's deep in our subconscious.
Yeah, and smell
You know,
doesn't have a filter either. It doesn't change with age. Smell is
no,
the only
yeah,
sense that doesn't do that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's right. So, so that's the subconscious mind. It plays a huge part in it. And the point is, you can train it. You
Mm.
can train your subconscious.
Yeah.
But it's a training. It's part of that part of your brain. You don't teach your subconscious. You train your subconscious,
Yeah.
and it's habitually it's habit driven.
Yes.
So it's the habits really affect our subconscious as well. So that's a very, very important thing. And that's, again, people get a bit confused about all that stuff, and it can get a bit airy-fairy. And I think that's important for people to understand, again, what's going on in your head and how your brain works, just like your body.
Yeah, I think from that perspective, what you're talking about, this training of your feeling brain or your subconscious part of your brain as well, relates to simplify that, I guess, because my background includes being in the Australian Army. I was posted to the SAS, and in that time there was a lot of drill. And the drill was for that reason, so that you just reacted.
Yeah.
And is it as simple as that? Because sometimes we overcomplicate things. I think a lot of times we overcomplicate things.
Yeah.
Is it as simple as that? Is having that decision of, hey, I'm going to go on this journey to wellness, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to train myself, and also to be sensible about it. If you pick 10 to 20 different things that you're going to do in a day, the chances are you're probably not going to do it, and you're not really, because you're only going to do it half-hearted. Is it better to just pick one thing, one or two things, do that, make it a habit, train your feeling brain and your unconscious brain, and move forward that way? What would be your guidance for people in that area?
You might have heard of a saying called "one day at a time."
Yep.
So, okay, it doesn't
a song,
just
isn't
mean,
it, as well?
No, well, that's right. It's a song too, but it doesn't just mean one day at a time. It means one thing at a time. It means one problem at a time, one task at a time, one thought at a time, one thing at a time. So 1 minute at a time. For me, where it was profound was that when I was overwhelmed and I was having anxiety because I was being overwhelmed, and I was told, line your problems up in a row in your head, line them up in a row, and have one behind the other. Deal with one problem at a time, then deal with the next problem. So that's important. What you're talking about there, being in the military, that's exactly it. Really encapsulates it, because you know what it is to be a soldier. You've learned. So I can give you a textbook, and you can learn how to dismantle and rebuild a weapon, a gun, whatever. You can learn how to fire the gun. You can learn all that information. It doesn't make you a soldier. A soldier's got to train. Yeah. And if you get away from the training, right, you're not an effective soldier anymore. Yeah. It's exactly the same with what's going on in here. So I'm constantly having to train my brain, right? And I do that through those constant habits. It is that simple. Yeah. So, and it sounds like, too, because you mentioned about this upward spiral, is there a point where you get to where this just happens automatically, and then it just it can, largely. I mean, the good habits feed on good habits, and I mean, people, you feel better, as you would know yourself. I mean, when you get into good physical shape, you eat well, you feel really well. Yeah. You feel better, you function better, you've got greater alertness, you stay young. You stay young physically and mentally. It's got so many rewards, and it starts to feed on itself, but it's a longer, slower process than using, say, stimulants to make yourself feel good. That's a faster road to the goal, and that's the problem. So, that's an instant gratification. Again, we talk about the inner child. The feeling brain's the inner child. Yeah. Right? When we ask ourselves a question, I love this question, people go, so ask myself, what would an adult do in this situation? When you're in a bit of a tough corner, what would an adult do in this situation? In other words, what would mum and dad do in this situation? We're really asking ourselves, what's our thinking brain thinking? Yeah. That's what it is. It's like, turn on your thinking brain and act like a grown-up. Yeah. And then we say to ourselves, that child within us, and look, I'm just feeding my inner child. What you're talking about is your feeling brain. That's the really immature sort of instant gratification, selfish part of our brain. Again, it's all part of our survival instinct, and all this stuff is necessary to make us human beings. It's all necessary. We've just got to keep it in check and in balance.
Yeah.
But it is as simple as just do the drill.
And from that perspective as well, when we're talking about, because you mentioned earlier, we get to a certain point where we're not learning anymore, and that's something that's always bothered me because, to me, the logic doesn't make sense. As you get older, you should have more experience. And I remember when I was doing my motorbike license, and I wasn't an adult. I'd ridden a motorbike for a long time, just never had a license, and so I've gone to get my motorbike license, but I remember the instructor talking about it, and I was, I can't remember how old I was, but I was well over the age of getting a license. And the instructor was talking about how, because motorbike riding is dangerous, and how the older people will have are more likely to survive and less likely to be in incidents because of that experience that they bring to the table. A lot of them have been driving, so that they have this, and you mentioned about the subconscious, they have this awareness of what's going on. Now, and that's where I wonder, from a learning perspective, is it a case where we get to a point in certain areas of our life where we become so ingrained that this is the way? And you mentioned before about people that have higher education tend to get to a point where they actually have more difficulty learning because they become so certain in their identity that this is who they are. Therefore, they can't accept new information to learn something new. Is that something, is that from what you understand from that perspective of why adults find it more difficult to learn? And can they let that go?
Again, you really touched on several things in framing your question. The first thing is, your subconscious becomes more powerful as you get older because you filled it up with more information. So there's more in it. There's more in. I'm older than you. I've got more in my subconscious mind. I've just seen more. I've experienced more. And that's what we talk about. This guy's really got a lot of life experience. That's what it means. He's got a memory and a subconscious that's full of good stuff. But the other thing is, referring back to being very intelligent. If someone's suffering in the field of addiction, they're very intelligent. They're harder to get sober because their denial is greater. In other words, they can reason. They can. We call it a neocortex hijack, the neocortex, the thinking brain. And what happens is, what you desire, what you want, that feeling part of your brain hijacks the neocortex and gets it to go into denial. Right? And you deny there's a problem. I deny there's an issue. I deny, Grandpa smoked till he's 80. He's still fine. I can keep smoking. That's sort of rubbish, right? That's where you hijack that thinking brain. And if you're really, really smart, when you do a neocortex hijack, it's far more effective. So as a more intelligent person can have much greater denial. You know what I mean? Whereas a simpler person will go, obviously there's a problem and I can't deny it. It's staring me in the face. I think the other question you touched on, and the other part of your question is that if we're, well educated, sort of, we're set in our ways, sort of thing. Life, we see life through this particular lens. We can't shift perspective. I think one of the key guys at the Nuremberg trials post World War II said, he said, "I've discovered evil. It is the inability to have empathy." And that was, I think, that sort of covered what you're talking about. People can't shift their perspective. And they see it through this fixed lens. And that is a problem. And I've certainly suffered that problem in my life. That's where I talk about things that tactics you can use to shift your perspective. Like one of them is a simple exercise. We've currently got the video running on social media about eulogy. It's not even a minute long, I don't think, where what do you want people to say in your eulogy? What do you want people to say about you? Do you want people to say Damien was a really thoughtful, generous man, and he always thought of others. He thought of his fellows, and he was a great father, whatever, Or do you want him to say, oh, he's a great businessman. He was a great entrepreneur. He made a fortune with his online business, blah, blah, blah. You don't want to say that. You know what I mean? Like, how do you want them to see you and to think of you. And when you go through that exercise, it shifts your perspective.
Yeah.
And then you go, well, hang on, if I want people to think I'm kind and generous and, I think about others and I've got plenty of time for my fellows, et cetera, maybe I should sort of behave that way. So it's a great exercise to get you out of your current perspective, shift your perspective to an external perspective. So that's part of one of the things you need to, that's part of wellness, is not getting into that fixed frame perspective where, because that is a problem. Yeah.
Does that fall under that category? Because you mentioned a few times in this conversation about being selfish. And from that perspective, with that fixed mentality, what it sounds like is you're not really listening anymore to what someone else is saying. You've already made up your mind. So it doesn't matter what they say, you've got your opinion. So you're not listening and you're certainly not asking questions. For someone that wants to break out of that framework, is that, again, it's just a simple process to stop and listen and ask questions?
Yeah, no, I don't think that is. I think that I don't think it's selfish, by the way. I don't think it's necessarily selfish. Self-absorbed, I guess. Just want to be a little bit careful here because one of the things about listening is that I'll be listening to you, like we're having this interview, and if I'm not careful and I'm not listening to you and I start to think about what I'm going to say next and I won't hear the question, and I'll be going, excuse me, Damien, what was the last question? Which can happen. So, I've got to be careful that I'm really listening to you in the interview situation. But a lot of people don't. You have a conversation and they're not listening. They're actually thinking about what they're about to say.
That's my point, yeah.
Right, yeah. And that's what you're doing. And selfish is not the right word, but I think that's a normal human behavior. I think that it takes self-awareness that you're doing that.
Yeah.
You're blocking incoming information.
That's the point. I was getting to with that is, if we're not actually listening anymore. And I remember reading about Nelson Mandela, who's talking about his dad, who was leader of the tribe that he grew up in. And when they had the meetings, his dad would go around the room first and ask everyone else and listen. And his dad would always speak last. And I was just wondering from that perspective is, on this journey to wellness, how much of this wellness of being well, and I'm kind of leading into it a little bit here because we're coming back to the giving and gratitude, but is how much of that is being able to take in that information, to being, okay, I can handle that information. I'm secure enough in myself that I can take that on board.
I think that's a good way of framing it. It's about self, not ego, but, where you're self-confident enough that you can listen. I'm not sitting there, it's not about my ego and what clever question can I ask next sort of thing. And I don't get caught up in my own thinking, but I'm just sitting here and I'm open to what you're saying and I'm listening. That I think that's something that comes with maturity. That you could put that one down to maturity. I know that in my life when I've been humbled, and this is, of course, we tend to go through life crises.
Well, that's what I was wondering, is it maturity or is it humbleness?
I think, well, it's mature. It's both. I mean, being humble, I think, is part of being mature. But certainly you become humble through life experiences. So, when I reached my rock bottom through at 27, I became receptive. And there was a lot of people with a lot of advice that I was now prepared to listen to. Up to that point, I wasn't prepared to listen. So I was humbled. And then there was this sort of loss of ego. I don't have the answers. I can't fix this. So, I became powerless, right? So I became receptive and I listened. And I think that again, it's an internal process. You struck on an internal process right at the start of the interview. I said that's really just an internal thing, the rock bottom. You come to that insight internally. I think that is people who do it readily. And I know some people who really can, they're really receptive. It's not about them, and they're really humble. And I know they're great listeners because they'll sit there quietly. I'm always interested, someone's sitting there and you go, someone's sitting there and they're not saying much. They're not giving anything away. And then when they do finally speak, they say something utterly profound.
Yes.
And you think they've really been listening. They've really been listening, So that's something I think that's an internal skill, and I think it's one well worth learning. And the best way is all you can do externally is make people aware of it. You
How
know,
did someone learn that? Because I remember a mentor that I had long time ago, he talked about the wide-eyed factor. You mentioned about children, and it was that wide-eyed factor he referred to it as. Is if you go out, if you tell a child, you take a child out into the backyard and say, see the grass there? Everything out there is alive. And the child will be going, wow, really? What? And they'll be asking
yeah.
questions. Is that something that if someone's lost that they can learn again? And how do they do that?
I don't know whether they can. I think again, if you spark the curiosity, they can.
Mm.
I mean, one of the ways that mental health, just in if we talk about aging and dementia and that type of thing, one of the most powerful things you can do is to learn a new skill, a new mental skill.
Mm.
So, like learn music, learn how to fly,
Mm.
learn knitting,
Yeah.
anything, like, and that's to have that kind of rebirth of from the beginning, go back to the beginning. Because if someone
You
was
got to
to
work
teach,
through the beginners suck though. Is that-
exactly, yeah, that's right, you
yeah,
do,
yeah.
and of course we don't want to do that, but it's really good for your mental faculties
Mm.
if you do that, and if you think about it, you've got to be very humble, don't you? It's
Yeah.
a sort of giving up of the ego. It's like giving up of everything. My status has got to be surrendered, and I've got to go back to
Accepting that
I
you
don't.
don't know.
Yeah, you've got. I don't know. I don't know. Powerful words. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. And it was interesting. There was when I was working in a workshop back in the
Mm.
days of electronics. The service manager would say, "I never want to hear. I know. I
Yeah.
never want to hear those words come out of anyone's mouth. I know." Right.
Mm.
So, we always, it was, you had to stay humble,
Yeah.
or you weren't teachable. He said, well, I can't teach you anything if you already know it.
Yes.
So, yeah, he drove it home in the old fashioned way, you know.
No, and I love that. And because part of the work that I'm doing now is we're talking about what is manly and trying to find the framework for that. And from that side of things, there is that, and I hate the word that they call it a norm because it's not my experience. But then again, my experience isn't the global experience. But they talk about men not asking for help and not expressing emotions, which is too. When I look at it, I mean, I went to the SAS. All the guys there could ask questions when they needed help, and also knew how to, they knew how to express emotions and ask questions. But then, as someone pointed out to me, we were all screened before we got there. So we had done psychological tests too.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm guessing we had a predisposition
Disposition,
to do that. Definitely, I work in courts too, so maybe that's where that came from.
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, from that perspective, if we narrow it down to the guys here, I mean, how important is it for guys to be able to ask those questions to actually go, hey, I need help, and to do that, and how does a guy do that when they might have been trained not to ask for help?
Yeah, that's something that I'm glad to say, I think in the broader community is changing.
Mm.
So there's a redefinition of what is a man,
Mm.
or and I mean, it doesn't mean you're some tough guy that has no emotions, and you know what I mean.
Mm.
That's sort of a bit of a thing of the past. Given my exalted status of being 60 years old, I also sort of come from the other. I was raised when you didn't cry. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like if you cried, you sort of was something to be embarrassed about,
Mm.
and you didn't talk about emotional stuff and all that sort of stuff. That added to my denial. I mean, I can only share my personal experience here.
Yeah.
That added to my denial that I had a problem.
Mm.
So it took me that much longer to get into recovery. And when I got into recovery, I had to be totally humble, and I had to, you'd walk, you'd walk past someone who was one of my mentors, and they'd say, "How are you, Alan?" And I'd go, "Yeah, I'm fine." And that's the throwaway line of the blokey throwaway. "Yeah, I'm fine, mate. I'm fine. I'm good, thanks,
Yeah.
mate."
And if it comes from a woman, you know that you're in trouble.
yeah, but they grab you. They'd actually grab me. Grab you. Go, "No, how are you, Alan? How are you really?"
Yeah.
That's the start of a conversation. And so I certainly was. I think there's a change going on now,
Mm.
and I think it's a change absolutely for the better. Where you need to open up. I do a video again in the course. Talk,
Mm.
and it's so important that we communicate. If you look at almost any form of mental illness,
Mm-hmm.
one of the key symptoms will be isolation.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
We say this to people. Alcohol will isolate you and kill you.
Mm.
So that's what they do. It isolates you and it will kill you.
Mm.
So the polar opposite of isolation is to talk, 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 talk. And as you can tell, you can't shut me up. I can't stop talking. So, but that's a big part of my recovery. That's a big part of, is absolutely sharing and sharing and sharing, and sharing on an emotional level. I've had a terrible day. I did this today. I know that it was a stupid thing to do, and I feel really bad about it. I'm too embarrassed to apologise. That sort of really open up and be honest, and be prepared to talk about your emotions. We're seeing, particularly, I guess, if you want to, it is a blokey field industry, is farming.
Yeah.
And with all the crises they've had over the past few years, they've had a huge problem with suicide rates, et cetera, in the farming community. And I have little doubt that a huge part of that is they lack fellowship and they lack forums in which they can talk and share about what's going on in their lives and the frustrations and the fears and the concerns, and talk with someone who can empathise and understand what's going on. And they're bottling it up, and you're seeing, we see the effect. I mean, it'll isolate you and it'll kill you. So, talking and communicating, as I say, I'm glad to see there's a change, there's a shift in thinking and attitude about what is a man, so to speak. It's a key thing in wellness for sure.
I love that. And one of the things that I mean, you'll remember the movie Crocodile Dundee.
Yeah.
And I love the scene where they're talking about a psychiatrist, and she asked Mick Dundee, don't you have a psychiatrist at Walkabout Creek? How do you get your problems out in the open? He says, well, if we have a problem, we tell Wally. Wally tells everybody else, and no more problem.
That's right. And
again, is it as simple as that? We just need to be encouraging. Is it that part of the shift? We just need to be encouraging. Let's talk about it. It's okay to talk about it. I know from my experience, some of my clients were in the construction field and walking around construction sites. I'll start talking about something or show a funny video to do with the relationships, and it's amazing the people that just open up. Do we just need to create those safe spaces?
Yeah, we do, and that's those. It's power of example. So you open up, you talk, you start, you initiate. Other people will follow. That's certainly part of it. Providing environments that people are comfortable to talk, closed environments. That's an important thing. They're all the sort of initiatives that I'm starting to see happen in the community. I mean, the Men's Shed, the Men's Sheds program.
Yeah,
I believe now there's a boys' shed.
Okay.
There's even
awesome.
So I mean, because we lost fellowship. I mean, we really moved away. The churches, of course, don't play a major role in our life anymore, and so we don't have healthy fellowship. And I see unhealthy fellowships, like blokes down at the sporting club talking about footy and drinking beer, and the only conversation is football or cricket or something like that. That's not healthy fellowship. We need to be having conversations about, we need to be talking about our marriages. We need to be talking about, men need to talk about their children, all that sort of stuff. What's going on in their personal lives, not what's going on at work and what's happening on the footy field and stuff like that, which, is kind of like safe ground. We've got to move into, it's got to get a little bit more down to the personal stuff. And that, I think that is changing as I say, in the modern world. I don't know whether social media is helping it or hindering it. I'm learning to use social media to communicate through social media. I'm 60 years old, so it's a bit of a big step, but I'm absolutely into the live show. I love to talk to people face to face. So I'm very much of that school. And I think if you are going to, have a change or precipitate a change in my age group and older, then you need to have face-to-face forums where people can come to. I think that there's sort of never going to feel comfortable, say, with social media. I'd hate to see, the change is taking place on social media, because then an entire sort of demographic's going to miss out because they're not open to social media. If you see my point.
I completely agree. Yeah, from that perspective, it's social. I mean, in-person radio is probably another good area. But this fellowship that you're talking about, I want to touch on that a bit, because again, I consider myself very lucky. My dad used to take me when he played social golf and bowls, and so I'd go there and I would be then paired off or quadded off, how, golf you play in fours. So initially I went with my dad and I went around with my dad, but that very quickly changed to me going off with other gentlemen and playing the 18 holes or playing the bowls, pennant, whatever it was, with a whole bunch of other guys. And these guys were a lot older. And from that perspective, obviously, because I was younger and learning, I was asking questions. They were mentoring me. And we talk about this fellowship and said I was very, very lucky to get that. And I wonder, and rightly so, with the feminist movement, it was about creating equality. That's great. But did we go too far and then shut off? Because, for example, you can have women's gyms and that's okay. But if it was to be a man's gym, it would be considered sexist. Have we shut off in accidentally? I'll use that term because I don't think it was intentional. But have we shut off that fellowship that men need?
I think pendulums always swing too far, don't they? So there's a need for both sides. There is a need, there's a need sometimes for men want to talk about stuff with other men that they don't want to have women around for, and they don't want to have children around for, and they want to talk to other men because they identify with other men. I'm a man. I identify with you. I don't want to have that conversation in front of a woman, and it may embarrass me. Now, for the same reason, we have women's groups. Same thing. They want to talk about stuff. They don't want to do it in front of men, and good reason. But I think that happens on both sides. That goes both ways. I think there needs to be. I was very lucky. I was brought up in a household around a lot of women. So I wasn't brought up in just a male environment. It was very much equal in terms of gender exposure. And men played a role in my upbringing as well as women playing a large role in my upbringing. My mother, who's an ex-school teacher, laments the fact that most teachers are now women, not men. In primary school, she said it's not actually as balanced. It needs to be more balanced. Generally, I think you need the input of both, of course, and you also need times when you need to have a forum that is exclusively male forum and forums that are exclusively female forums.
Yeah, because I mean, similar sort of thing. I was lucky. Same. I had a very strong mother figure in my life as well. My mum was actually post World War II the first female apprentice motor mechanic, and she had to move from Victoria to New South Wales. So she was very strong in what she did, but she was also very womanly. But from that perspective, I look at it and I look at I have a son who's 14 years old, and for a number of years now, there's some friends of mine that we get together, and it's very blokey, not misogynistic or anything like that, but it is fart jokes. Now we get together and it's that kind of stuff. We're girls, not really, and my friend has a Grand Prix party every year, and we go to that, and poker nights. And every now and then, one of the ladies will come and they never come back. But I made a very specific point of taking my son from an early age to be part of that. And it's been interesting watching his development, being around older guys and him being able to hold his own with a bit of the sledging. And the sledging is not, mean sledging. It's just that, the pushing of buttons to see if you can get a rise out of somebody. And that's why I wonder whether we need to have more guys saying, hey, this is not, we're not being derogatory to women or anything like that, but we just need I remember in my first marriage, the pastor said, keep your shed. Men need their shed. That'll save marriages.
I think, as I say, that's for every individual. That's for men and women. Yes, I mean, going back to your childhood, I was in the same situation. I mean, I'd get in the blokey where they literally my grandmother had a shed. She had 3 boys, and they were always pulling a car apart or putting it back together. And I could go in there. None of the women wanted to be there.
Yeah,
they could have been. No one would have stopped them, but they didn't want to be in that environment. By the same token, I had 2 sisters, and they put me in a dress when I was 3 and 4, and they put makeup on me, and I learned to bake cakes, and I did all that sort of stuff when I was a kid.
My mum put me in a dress, and my grandfather hit the roof apparently. So.
Well, that's of course, but that. So I mean that's healthy too. So
I agree.
and that's all part of it too. So I'm not saying that if I have to share my stuff as being a sober person, I couldn't share it with you because you wouldn't understand it.
No,
right? You don't empathise because you haven't been down that road. So I have to go and be in a very special fellowship just for that.
Yeah, that's a very good analogy.
Yeah, and then I'm part of an audio club because I'm also a technician
Yeah.
And I'm a weekend technician. I lock myself away in a shed. My wife leaves me alone. I literally go into the shed by myself.
Yeah.
I can be in there for 8 hours. But then I go to the Melbourne Audio Club, which is a bunch of ex-techs, engineers playing around with audio equipment. And they're a specialist group. Again, if I had that conversation with you now, your eyes would glaze over in about 2 minutes flat. So
I made my own little circuit boards when I was younger.
There you go.
So
there you go.
I might enjoy that conversation.
So, but you can see what I'm saying is that this is kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's specifically unique to men or women or young.
And that wasn't the point of the
old
question.
But we do need those groups, and that's
that was the point of the question. We need those groups for specialists.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Now, I want to come back to this. I mean, you talked a number of times. You alluded to higher purpose, giving, gratitude. How important is that? Being able to give. I remember when after I left the army, I was in Perth. And I was walking through the Perth Mall. I didn't have a job. I didn't have any money in my bank account. I didn't have any change. I had a $20 note in my pocket. And as I was walking through the mall, an Aboriginal man came up to me and asked me for change. And I didn't have any. So I said, no, I didn't. Then I thought about it for a second. And I pulled this $20 note out and I handed it to him. And at first he turned it over a few times. I don't think he thought it was real. And then I still remember his eyes lit up. He started dancing around. He jumped on top of a bin and was jumped on a seat. Dan ran over to, I'm assuming his wife or partner, was dancing in front of her. And I just stood there forever watching this person do that. And I just felt amazing. Now, in that moment, I didn't think of the fact that I didn't have any more money because I'd just given it away. I didn't have a job to get more money. And I wasn't sort of one that went on the dole or anything, so I had no other income. But I remember that feeling. Now, ironically, whether it's connected or not, I don't know. The next morning I got a call about someone needing a job. They needed someone to come in straight away to have an interview. So I went in and I got the job. Now, and I don't know that, I wonder if because I was feeling good about myself, I performed better in that interview. How important is it? Because you mentioned about, being focused on ourselves as opposed to giving to others. How important is mental wellness, or how much important is giving and gratitude? They're two separate things, but let's deal with both in being mentally well.
You ask big questions, Damien. Very big questions. I think a lot of the time you sort of answer your own question a bit with your framing, but I think that it's we have a hole in our soul. When you hear people say that I've got a hole in my soul, in other words, they just feel empty. They don't feel fulfilled. Mm-hmm. Now that is, when you've got that hole in your soul, that's purpose. So to be complete and to be happy. Not feel good, which is a short-term thing. Happiness is a longer-term thing. To be happy, I need to have pleasure and purpose, and that purpose has to be greater than myself. That's what I've found. So the purpose can't be to acquire assets for me. I can work. I mean, let's say I'm in the stock market business. Let's say I'm in electronics. I work as a repair technician. I repair equipment for other people. They pay me for that, but I am helping and benefiting them by repairing machinery. If I'm working in the stock market, I'm getting paid, but my purpose is to educate people. I work obviously in drug and alcohol recovery, that type of thing that benefits others. I work in wellness. I mean, it's commercial. It's a commercial enterprise. We're quite open about that. It is a commercial enterprise. But I am genuinely benefiting other people by what I'm doing. So it has a real purpose greater than myself attached to it. And I think that's very much a key thing. If people want to be truly happy, is to have a purpose. Okay, that is greater than themselves.
Can you be happy if you don't have that greater purpose?
I think it's very hard to be happy. I think that, I mean, if you've got a mother who's raising children, her purpose is to raise children, and that's a purpose greater than herself. Most of us work in a career or some sort of a job where we're benefiting others, not just ourselves. So in most situations, when you go and analyze it, and when people are, as I say, remember we've got this issue with self. And if you don't want to let that one out of the box. And so if your sole purpose is yourself, right, that's a pretty dangerous recipe. Okay. And it seems to me we work on feeling good is largely a contrast effect. And no matter how good you feel, you want to feel more good. Right? Like you have the situation where you work a 40-hour week. You might think, well, that's a pretty tough week. Well, get someone who works 60 hours a week and let them work 40 hours and see what they think. And they'll say it's a bludge. So it's all comparison, it's all contrast. But one of the things we find, obviously, as human beings, is if we try and just concentrate and work at making ourselves feel good, what's inevitably going to happen is you're going to blow yourself up because you just want to. It's a contrast effect, and you'll just keep feeding, and you'll just blow yourself up. So I think it's really important that your purpose needs to be something greater than yourself. That's it's a very healthy attitude to have, and it's a key part of wellness.
How does someone choose something great? I mean, you mentioned mothers, and obviously that's probably ingrained for mums that they want to, help their children. And I've seen some mums that don't, but anyway, I think majority of mums do have this higher purpose. How does someone, find that high? Can they find it, or do they choose it? Do they just?
I think you do. You do find it, or you choose it. I mean, you get people who retire. Obviously, they've lost their job status, they've lost their career, and they were helping others. They were serving a purpose greater than themselves. Usually what happens there is you get that situation where a lot of them struggle for a couple of years. But that's why you've got the Lions Club, you've got the Probus Club, you've got the you've got the Rotary Club. These are ways in which they can go and serve a purpose greater than themselves. So they're still going on holidays, they're still going caravanning, they're still doing this, but they're also volunteering and helping other people and putting something back into the community. So if you can't, find a purpose that's custom built to yourself, there's plenty of kind of off-the-shelf solutions like the Lions Club and Rotary Club. And I mean, the SES, the CFA, there's so many organisations. They're going to give you fellowship. They're gonna give you new skills. And they're gonna give you a purpose, a good, healthy, great purpose that you're benefiting the community and benefiting yourself. I've got to give it away to keep it. I've got to give it away to keep it. That's another saying you might have heard. I've got to give it away to keep it. So that's very true. So that I think that is a very important point. I say if you can't find something in your own scope, in your own field, take an off the shelf solution.
Yeah, and there's so many organisations out there, such as you mentioned, CFA and Lions and all those kind of things, Meals on Wheels, all contributing and helping people. From that perspective, let's get into the product placement part of the interview. You've moved on and obviously very successful in the financial world, which you say you're still doing a bit, but you've now got Alan Hull Wellness. Tell us a bit about Alan Hull Wellness, what you offer, how you help people. And how people can connect with you.
Okay, so we've just launched a new website, which is alanhullwellness.com, which is I've got a signature course on this. I've got a lot of free material. There's quite a lot of free videos. There's a lot of free content. I believe in giving it away. So I like we're doing this interview. It's not just an ad or a plug, but there's some real genuine education content. We're giving away and putting out a lot of information on social media, which is free educational content through the form of videos. I think that's the main medium at the moment is videos. But on our course, on our website, we have our signature course. Now I only want to make one course. So what I've got is a course that is currently over 70 videos long that we spent a very, very long time putting the material together. It's huge. So, but what I want to do over time, I've got a lot. I'm always adding material, so I'm always sort of I've got a list, and I've got to get the stuff out of my head, and I'm writing stuff down, and I could go do some note taking after this interview, for instance. But so we're going to constantly add new videos to it. We're not going to sort of break it up. So anyone who comes in and buys the course now, you get lifetime access. So this is not just awesome. I'm going to go through, look at this, that's it, one and done. It's a case of this is a lifetime reference material. And of course, we expect people are going to share it with their family. But we're going to grow it. So we're currently, I think it's under $200. I suspect in 5 years it might be
$149, I think, when I looked at it the other day.
Yeah. But in 5 years, it's probably going to be $4.99 or something, because it's not going to be 72 videos. It's going to be 272 videos. That's
the rate
what
of
I'm
inflation
hoping.
at the moment. Probably
Yeah. So I want to just keep adding to it and adding to it.
Yeah.
And people, I don't think we've really made it clear to people on the website that it's actually lifetime. You have lifetime access to this. But certainly enjoy the free material.
Because I didn't realize that, but it looked very, very extensive. What you had there. But the fact that it's lifetime membership and you're going to continue adding to that, that's wow, that's huge value.
Yeah. So that, in terms of the value proposition, I think it's huge. And I mean, I think a lot of people didn't really understand that. I do not want to make different courses. So what I'd rather do is within the course have a module on anxiety, or have a module on addiction, and just work on build those modules up if people want to just look into those specific areas. But I want it to become virtually like a library of wellness stuff. Material, and it may not just be in the future from me, it might be from other sources as well. We might bring in collaborators to work on it as well. So that's what it is. It's all there on alanhullwellness.com. Go there, check it out. You can see, although you probably heard it right here in this interview, but you can also go and look at my story and my background. And the curriculum's there, etc., etc. So yeah, we're very happy of this. We're very happy with the site. We're very proud of it. And the people who've, it's been a team effort, and they've all done a fantastic job. And I think we've come up with a good product, and I'm really happy with.
Yeah, it's very impressive, and I would highly encourage the listeners to check that out at alanhullwellness.com. That these details will be in the show notes. But it's extreme. I didn't realize that it was that lifetime membership, because it was impressive as it was. But the fact that you're going, once you've joined up, you can again continue to get new information. That's awesome. I love that model. And if anyone has any questions, what's the best way to reach you?
They can email me. Probably the best way is just through inquiries@alanhullwellness.com. There's a contact us page on the website, so just send your inquiries in through there. I love a chat, so no problems at all. I invite inquiries and queries, and certainly any questions. If you looked at our videos and looked at our material and you've got any questions on that, any feedback, I'd love to hear from you.
I love that. Now, Alan, I did give you a heads up that we're going to ask you this question. If you were going to sum up your key wisdoms in a nutshell, what would that be? What would be the takeaway that you wanted the audience to take away from this interview?
Know how your brain works. Know your brain. So that's if you start, you know your body. We understand our body. We can see our body. We can't see our brains. Learn how your brain works. So if you learn how your brain works, everything else will simply blossom from that. But learn how your brain works. That's the key. That's the starting point for me.
I love that. Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the foundation, is to understand how your brain works. Alan, it has been such a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you for all your wisdom. I'd love to chat further again some point in the future and touch base and see how you're going. But thank you for making the time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being part of the Share.Care community and helping people around the world prosper. You're creating a bigger pie for everyone to share. The more people contributing to the world being a better place, the better the world becomes, for others and for you.